Good afternoon, friends. I'm Dr. Aajay Shah, and I'm continuing this part 2 of the video on live on fiber and microbiome. Yesterday we covered the importance of fiber, and then we're continuing today on importance of microbiome. Microbiome is actually the different type of microbes or bacteria and viruses which resides on our body. Majority of the microbes actually are in our colon, and typically they are bacteria. So there are 39 trillion bacteria in our colon. 39 trillion bacteria in our colon actually.
I just want to let you know your 145 is late, but I'm just
Actually, in our body, 99% of our genetic material is non-human. 99% of genetic material actually is non-human. When it comes down to microbiome, for every person, we have a different microbiome actually. Microbiome is almost like a fingerprint or like our DNA. Everybody has a different microbiome. The key thing to know about is that our own genetic material is non-malleable. So whatever genetic material, genetic code, genetic DNA we are born with it is unchangeable. But the genetic material of microbiome is easily changeable. So that's the important thing to remember, that we cannot change our own genetic material, but we can change the genetic material of microbiome by changing the types of bacteria, particularly in the colon. Other thing to also know is that as environment and as our habits affect our own genome, same way the environment and our habits can actually affect the genome of microbes also. So like I said, there are 30 trillion human cells, but there are 100 trillion total microbes in our body. And out of that, 39 trillion bacteria resides in the colon, resides in the gut actually. So truly we are actually a supraorganism, because not only we are ourselves as human, but we also have many other microbes. Microbes actually process many drugs and actually can also make many vitamins, including vitamin K and many of the B vitamins. Interesting and funny thing is that when we kiss, actually almost 80 million microbes are exchanged. So there's a constant non-stop exchange happening between human and pets, human and environment. So there's always a constant exchange of microbes happening between human and the environment and human and the people. So when it comes down to microbes, there are bacteria, there are fungi, there are parasites, there are archaea, and there are viruses. By age three, actually, our microbiome, particularly in the colon, is fully formed. So by age 3, which is very young age, colon has a fixed type of bacteria which can reside for the rest of our life. So like I said yesterday, it's very important that parents actually help the kids to develop the healthy microbiome. So again, after that, we typically don't have any change in our microbiome. When it comes down to bacteria in the colon, typically most Americans have about 1,000 different type of bacteria in the colon, 1,000 different type. But if you look at some of the tribes in Africa, like Hadza tribe in Africa, they have actually 1,600 different type of bacteria. And it's proven now that the diversity of the microbiome is the way we live longer, we live healthier. So diversity of microbiome is very important, obviously having a healthy type of bacteria. Most bacteria in the colon are beneficial, but obviously some bacteria are unhealthy, and we need to make sure we have a higher proponents of healthy bacteria. Again, microbiome actually can be malleable. Microbiome can be changed. It takes time, but it can be changed. So if you start eating healthy plant-based food, if you start having lots of soluble fiber from plant-based food, you can actually gradually modify your microbiome. When you have a good bacteria in the colon, actually it prevents the growth of unhealthy bacteria. When we have a bowel movement, 60% of stool actually is bacteria. So let's talk about some of the disease when unhealthy microbiome can happen. First one is a leaky gut syndrome, where there is a breakdown between the epithelial cells. There are tight junctions between the epithelial cells. When we have a unhealthy microbiome and we don't have enough soluble fiber in our diet, these tight junctions actually break down, and there is a leaky gut syndrome happening. And because of leaky gut, many of the endotoxin from bacteria gets absorbed and can cause many of the autoimmune disorder. It can also cause chronic inflammation, chronic low-level inflammation. When we have a less soluble fiber in our diet, it produces less small chain fatty acids, and colonic cells actually depends upon this small chain fatty acid for their energy, for nutrition. So when we have a less soluble fiber in our diet, actually those colonic cells have a poor replication, and many of these tight junctions break down and leaky gut syndrome happens. There's also a condition called dysbiosis, where there is growth of unhealthy bacteria. And dysbiosis typically happens when we have more animal products. There's also small intestinal bacterial overgrowth syndrome, which also typically happens with animal products. It's also proven now that when a stool from an obese person is taken and given to a mice which does not have any bacteria in the system yet, that mice actually becomes obese. So there is some proof, there is some data that the microbiome actually plays a large role in obesity. Microbiome also plays a large role in insulin sensitivity. Microbiome also plays a large role into our society and fullness when we eat. 70% of Americans actually have some form of gut disease. Many of them have irritable bowel syndrome, many of them have constipation, many of them have diarrhea, many of them have Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, and a lot of this gut disease actually can lead to many of the systemic disease. Actually, it's proven that kids who got antibiotic in the first year of childhood have three times chance, threefold increase in the irritable bowel disease. So let's talk about this concept of prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotic. Prebiotic is the one which we have in our food. Typically, it's a soluble fiber, but all different types of fiber are the prebiotic. Probiotic actually are the bacteria themselves, particularly in the colon. And then there's a concept of postbiotic, and postbiotic are the substances or molecules which are made by probiotic working on prebiotic. So postbiotic substances are actually small chain fatty acid and many of the other beneficial postbiotics. So when bacteria digest a soluble fiber, it produces small chain fatty acid. Small chain fatty acid, we call SCFA, small chain fatty acid, actually are the most healing nutrient in the nature, one of the most important substance for health. There are three types of small chain fatty acids: acetate, which is about 60%, propionate, and butyrate. Small chain fatty acid actually promotes a good bacterial growth and inhibits the bad bacterial growth. So small chain fatty acid is very important. We will cover the actions and benefits of small chain fatty acid in a second. 10% of our calories come from actually small chain fatty acids. So many times we say that soluble fiber, insoluble fiber does not provide any calorie or any energy. That's not true. Actually, 10% of our calorie comes from small chain fatty acid, which is made from soluble fiber when bacteria acts on them. So let's cover the benefits of small chain fatty acid. A lot of benefits, including cardiovascular disease, less heart attack, less chance. A lot of brain benefits, including prevention of Alzheimer's disease and dementia, prevention of stroke. Definitely a lot of benefits in maintaining good mood, immune system, even including sleep, prevention of prediabetes and diabetes. A lot of benefits in terms of metabolism, a lot of repair, prevention of leaky gut, definitely in terms of preventing obesity, also in terms of lowering cholesterol, even preventing many cancers, like I said, preventing Alzheimer's disease. It actually can maintain the telomere length, and it can also help in Parkinson's disease. It can also help with a lot of autoimmune disorder, a lot of skin disorder, even help in asthma, also prevention of type 1 diabetes, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, improves insulin sensitivity, also helps in estrogen, also actually prevents estrogen activation. So a lot of the estrogen related cancers can happen less, rheumatoid arthritis, even skin conditions like psoriasis, even Hashimoto's disease, even lupus, even also less chance of brain fog when we have a higher amount of small chain fatty acid. It actually also prevents the fatty acid going into the cells. So that way there's a less chance of diabetes and prediabetes. It also affects the satiety hormone. So people who have a regular fiber in the diet can have a higher amount of satiety with the same amount of food. It can also reduce the bile salt. So by reducing bile salt, less chance of colon cancer. So So definitely tons of benefit of small chain fatty acid. And again, small chain fatty acid, in my opinion, is one of the most healthy nutrient we can ever make. And that nutrient actually is made by bacteria by acting on soluble fiber. Um, when it comes down to our gut, immune system, 70% of the immune cells and immunity develops into the gut. A lot of the autoimmune disorders happens because of unhealthy gut, unhealthy microbiome. There's also a brain-gut connection. There are about 500 million nerves in the gut, and they are actually more than even spinal cord. And there's a significant correlation with unhealthy microbiome and mood and cognition. 90% of our serotonin, 90% of the serotonin is made into gut actually. And serotonin obviously plays a large role in our mood and our effect. So definitely serotonin is needed for better mood. And our microbiome affects significant amount of the serotonin production. 50% of dopamine is also made into gut by the action of microbiome. And dopamine is obviously the feel-good hormone. So definitely when people have an unhealthy microbiome, they definitely have mood disorder, including depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety, also autism, and you also some craving for the food. So definitely healthy microbiome is very important. Actually, there was an experiment done where they took a fecal implant from an extrovert mice to a timid mice, and that timid mice actually became somewhat more extrovert. So definitely microbes plays in our personality also. There was also another study done where women were given yogurt with bacteria, obviously, with culture, and those women had a much less negative emotions and negative thoughts. So that way, definitely microbiome plays a significant role in our mood, in our personality, the way we think. So how can we improve our microbiome? There are a lot of ways of doing it. Definitely diet plays a large role. Eating whole food plant-based diet is must to improve the microbiome. All those microbiome or the bacteria in the colon thrive on soluble fiber, and we need to provide them soluble fiber by eating whole food plant-based food. Typically, animal products does not make microbiome healthy. Many of the animal products actually makes the increase in the bad bacterial growth. Definitely types of fat we eat. Saturated fat affects the microbiome and it makes bad bacteria growth. Poly and monounsaturated fat actually is better to have a healthy microbiome. Omega-6 and omega-3 ratio also is important for microbiome. Presence of micronutrients and polyphenols in the diet also makes a healthy microbiome grow. When we have generations now, about 50, 60 years of American people, families eating low fiber diet, and there's definitely kind of a transmission of unhealthy microbiome from generation to generation. So again, this effect is not just now. This unhealthy microbiome effects has been going around for 50, 60 years, and those effects get transmitted from generation to generation. Exercise affects microbiome. Regular exercise improves the healthy microbiome. Sleep affects the microbiome. Chronic stress affects the microbiome and makes it unhealthy. Substance abuse and alcohol definitely makes unhealthy microbiome. Even our family members, like I said earlier, we share microbes with our family. And if family member has unhealthy microbiome, we also have higher chances of getting unhealthy microbiome. Having also pets also affects our microbiome. Exposure to nature, like walking barefoot on the grass, also helps us to have a healthy microbiome. Overuse of antiseptics also affects the microbiome. Food additives affects the microbiome. Breastfeeding is very important. Kids who have been breastfed have very healthy microbiome. Breast milk contains oligosaccharide, which actually is a substance where those bacteria in the colon thrives. So again, breastfeeding is very important. Mode of birth is also very important. Kids who are born with a vaginal delivery have a much healthier microbiome than C-section. Stress and mental disorder, even meditation makes a healthy microbiome. Our parents' health affects our microbiome. Mother's microbiome also affects kids' microbiome. All the places we have lived, whether we are in urban place or rural place, affects our microbiome. For a woman, pregnancy also affects the microbiome. In terms of the age, as we get older, the microbiome diversity goes down. and many times certain bacteria which are more seen in older age people also is the reason some of the chronic disease happen. It's interesting that in blue zones where people live up to 100 and healthy, their microbiome is much more maintained like young people microbiome. So definitely a microbiome, obviously is a marker of health, but also there is some causal role also. As a child, if you had a exposure to different natural things, including dirt, there's also a chance of healthy microbiome. Previous infections also affects the microbiome. Exposure to chemicals and toxins also affect the microbiome. Taking certain hormones also affects the microbiome. Personal hygiene obviously is very important. Caffeine also affects the microbiome. And travel also affects the microbiome. Antibiotic obviously affects the microbiome. Whenever a person has taken antibiotic, it wipes up the good bacteria and it promotes the growth of unhealthy bacteria. And you all know the example of Clostridium difficile. Taking certain medications, including proton pump inhibitor, non-steroidal, even birth control pills affects the microbiome. Steroids obviously affects the microbiome. Chlorinated water also affects the microbiome. High sugar diet also affects the microbiome. Sugar substitutes also affects the microbiome. Matter of fact, it's proven that people who are on a regular sugar substitute, their microbiome is unhealthy. So again, eating whole food, plant-based diet is the best way to have a healthy microbiome. Adding beans has a resistance charge, where many of the healthy bacteria thrive, and eating 1 to 2 cups of beans also helps you have a healthy microbiome. Eating fermented food also helps to have a healthy microbiome, and fermented food obviously include kombucha, kimchi, plant-based yogurt, miso, vinegar, including many of the traditional ethnic dishes. For Indian, for example, andvo and dokla, wherever there is a fermentation is done. Intact grains also very important for having healthy microbiome. When we talk about different type of diets, including keto and paleo diet, those diets are very low in fiber. As a matter of fact, people who are on keto and paleo diet have very unhealthy microbiome, and they have very low diversity of microbiome. You can actually measure your microbiome by a company which is called American Gut Project. It only costs about $79 or $89 to know whether you have a healthy microbiome or not. Traditionally, it's been thought that if person takes antibiotic, we should follow up with a probiotic. But recent study shows that we don't need to have probiotic after taking antibiotic. You can actually just increase your prebiotic, which is the beans and whole food plant-based diet, along with taking some fermented food. You don't need to take probiotic after an antibiotic course. In terms of the probiotic supplements, it's not necessarily recommended because most probiotic supplement does not change the microbiome like I explained earlier. It just temporarily changes. It does not change for the long term. So you have to keep taking the probiotic. In general, I don't recommend taking probiotic, but if you want to take probiotic, make sure you take the one which has a 50 billion or more colonies, at least 10 or more variety of bacteria. Make sure it's allergen free. Make sure you refrigerate it and then use it up before the expiry date. And have it in an individual blister pack instead of in a big bottle with all the pills together. There's also a new concept, there's a fecal implant where actually stool from one person is taken and is given to the other person, and it's commonly done in a condition called Clostridium difficile colitis. In that condition, it's very effective. Matter of fact, cure rate is almost 70 to 90%. So let me give you some final resources. There is a fiber fuel book. There's another book called Microbiome Solution. There's another book called Mind-Gut Connection. There's also another book also called Missing Microbes. All those sources are great sources. They're great books. Obviously, I'm going to give a lecture in about 2 weeks with slides, so please stay tuned for that. I hope you liked it. This was kind of a little bit of a long live. we are obviously growing. We now have crossed 100,000. We are on YouTube. We are also on Instagram. So please reach out to all those social medias. Thank you.